Let's go.
Slavery. I don't care if this hurts your feelings. I don't care. Abortion is the number one worst human rights issue that has ever happened on American soil.
Let me tell you all why this is so particularly funny to me, right? Now, first of all, let me make it clear that this video is not about pro-life versus pro-choice. That's not going to be what I'm talking about in this. I'm going to be talking about what she said, what she compared it to, and why.
Yeah, it's totally funny. I think it's really interesting that people always try and act like slavery is somehow worse than abortion. It is odd to me because it's like it's only 15 million at the most that were enslaved, and they weren't all killed, okay? And 20 million black lives have been killed by abortion alone. And I'm just saying, if we're just focused on black people, if you want to say you care about black lives and so forth, and you think it's funny that 20 million black lives have been snuffed out in a matter of less than 50 years, that kind of implies, you clearly don't value black lives. But then again, I'm not shocked. Continue.
This woman states that abortion is the worst human rights violation to ever occur on American soil, and it is worse than slavery. So the first question I have is, why was slavery the comparison that you made? Now, clearly this woman is Asian. I don't know what type of Asian she is, but my point in bringing that up is she could have brought up something that, was done towards Asians. She could have brought up the Japanese internment camps or something. She could have said abortion is worse than those.
No, it is much more appropriate to use slavery, considering that abortion, for example, we're both from the same state, I believe, right? We're both from Michigan. 55% of abortions are done on black people, even though black women are only 14% of the female population. Quite clearly, black children are targeted by abortion. That's what it is. And specifically, like I said before, it's literally 20 million black children who have been killed by abortion. And that's a minimum number. I mean, the number keeps growing, obviously, as time goes on. So my point in this is that, when you guys try and act like, why would you compare slavery to abortion? Well, it's because it targets black people specifically. Abortion targets black people. Abortion, even in states with small percentages of black people, like Idaho, for example, still there's a high percentage of black people getting abortions in those states before they outlawed it. And it's like, how is it that even in states where there are not many black people, and black people really don't live in Idaho like that, but still, somehow, you still have a high percentage of black women getting abortions there? Because black women and black children are targeted when it comes to abortion. Yes, they like to exterminate the black race. It's the main people who are the ones who are focused on getting abortions. White people have a very small percentage of people who get abortions compared to their population. It's like half. It's like 30% of white women get abortions in the demographics of women who get abortions. Yet white women are 60% of the population. You'll see Asian women and Hispanic women overrepresented. But who's overrepresented the most is black women, So to me, it's just like, of course you should bring up slavery or any other injustice done to black people, because this is definitely a racist issue. Abortion is racist and is racially conscious and it racially basically singles out black children. Anyway, continue.
Japanese internment camps, right? But no, she didn't bring any of those up. She didn't bring up the Trail of Tears that occurred towards Native Americans. No, she didn't bring any of that up. For some reason, slavery was her go-to. And I'm going to get into exactly why that is later on. Now,
because she values black babies' lives more than you will ever understand how to value black babies' lives. That's why she brought it up. And it's a shame that there are people of other races trying to save black babies' lives, and black women, largely from those populations and so forth, will be the main ones killing these black children. So it's like, there's a lot of self-hate, and there's a lot of devaluement of black children. I mean, like, specifically, even in the colorism sectors, they specifically say they don't value their darker skinned black children, and they don't like black features on their children. They see their darker children as black children as being less innocent, and they also don't value them. So if you have that mentality towards black children, of course, it's much easier to kill those children than other children, because you don't even value the children that you create, and it's just a shame that other people from other races have to basically intervene and try and say, no, this can't happen. We can't target black children like this, because black women will literally put them on the forefront of the people getting exterminated. Anyway,
I want to share a story to make a point, okay? Now, mind you, this story did not happen during slavery. It happened decades after slavery ended, okay? This story happened in 1918. Slavery ended in 1865. So I'm going to share with you all the story of Mary Turner. And Mary Turner, actually, her story in this concept begins with her husband, because her husband was lynched by a white mob. Now, I forget exactly why he was lynched, but it was something unjust, right? And Mary Turner chose to speak out against this. And
well, actually, honestly, that whole story had to do with specifically a pregnant woman getting shot and disfigured, and I believe her husband, and the father of her child being murdered. And then they had a big mob and tried to basically punish the people who may have committed the crime. But the thing was that her, specifically her husband basically was not guilty, supposedly, but they still killed him. And so she had issue with it. I just felt like in that situation, like, considering the environment, I don't understand why she didn't stick around for her kids, because she seemed to more so want to fight for her husband than her own kids, which was just really bad. But the point is, yes, I do get what you're talking about there, but maybe that's why a lot of people support abortion, because they don't value black children. And I guess that rubs off on the black women who do that to those children. But the point is that, you can't really try and act like, oh, they're terrible for wanting to save unborn black children. You can't even focus on that. Trying to act like that's not the big elephant in the room when it in fact is. I mean, like, after slavery, being completely honest with you, there were plenty of initiatives and proposals trying to bring Africans, Black American, I guess you could say, slaves back to Africa, basically, sending them back to Africa or the Caribbean, after they're freed for like almost 200 years, there are certain types of people, and I tend to think they're on the left side, who specifically have tried to figure out how to get rid of black people. Specifically, a major way that they have tried to accomplish this is through abortion, which has kept our numbers very low. So, yes, all of this is very connected, but you do not want to address it because you are liberal and you're probably pro-abortion. And therefore, you don't like the fact that it is targeting black people because you have to pretend you're for abortion and somehow you're for black people, but you're for black people's genocide. Go ahead.
Apparently, that was grounds for her to be lynched as well. This is the thing, though. Mary Turner was 8 months pregnant. Now, I'm sure everybody knows a pregnancy only lasts 9 months. By the time you get to 8 months, your baby is a baby. Like, if you go into labor, the baby is going to come out fully formed, right? So this lynch mob, they strung Mary Turner upside down. They tied up her ankles and tied her to a tree. They doused her in gasoline. Then they set her on fire, right? But then let me get into the next part. They sliced her stomach open, and when her baby fell out, it began to cry. And do you think the lynch mob was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm pro-life, this is just too much for me, right? Do you think that happened? No. They proceeded to stomp on the baby's head until it died, then shoot Mary Turner full of bullets. Seems like overkill to me, but hey, I'm just the messenger. You're probably wondering why I even told this story. Like, what does that have to do with the slavery versus abortion argument? Well, this is my point. This woman was making the argument that abortion is murder. She's saying, like, you're killing children who did not consent to being killed, basically, right? And she said that this is the greatest human rights violation to ever occur on American soil. And she goes on the stage. It's worse than slavery. But you all killed our babies during slavery. You all killed our babies during Jim Crow.
Now that's just weird. Why are you saying she didn't kill anybody? What are you talking about? Specifically, where was Mary Turner? Mary Turner was in Florida. Specifically, the mob was majority white. This is an Asian woman. Most likely her ancestors weren't even in America, and even if they were, they probably weren't in Florida, which was a predominantly white county. In fact, after this ordeal, specifically, there were no black people in that county for like decades. And when I say no black people, I mean no non-white people. So no Asians, no people of color. So I kind of find that really weird that you're saying anyone was trying to kill your kids. No, not quite. I do think, like I said, a lot of the ideology of today, I feel, has to do with the view of how people do not like black people. But that has to do with a historic definition of it, basically. So, yes, of course, you're only proving the point of how, like with abortion, that's why people are much more likely to kill black babies. And how she was saying it's the worst human rights issue, and it's worse than slavery because it's affecting black people. You're just showing the motive of how even in 1918, when abortion was illegal, black babies' lives were not valued, and therefore the reason for why there's such a highly targeted aspect to abortion that literally focuses on black unborn children. So that, I mean, like I said, you I don't know why you couldn't realize you were just spelling it out, but I mean, like, you clearly are here, because abortion literally targets black unborn children, and it actually doesn't focus on white unborn children. For example, like I said, white women only represent 30% of women who get abortions, yet they're 60% of the population. So they're clearly underrepresenting the population of women who get abortions, while black women at least represent 3 to 4 times their population when it comes to who gets abortions. So, yeah, like I said, in this situation, you're not really actually addressing the fact that, yes, abortion is way worse than slavery, because abortion kills 20 million black lives. There weren't even 20 million African slaves brought to America. At the most, it was 15 million. And not nearly 20 million African or Black American slaves were killed during slavery. So, who was more maniacal? Which one is more genocide? Which one is actually eradicating the black race? Abortion. Slavery was subjugating the black race, it was not actually eradicating and exterminating the black race. So, anyway, continue.
Crow. That was a part of slavery and Jim Crow. So for you to make that comparison and act like slavery and Jim Crow didn't have that component in them is just so short-sighted. Clearly, you have no idea of the history of.
No, it does have that component. Maybe, yeah, that's true. And don't you get that that makes sense why black children today are targeted by abortion? Because of that mentality of saying that you do not like the existence of black children, because nobody of that mentality wants the future of the black race to flourish. And those who want abortion always talk about how black unborn children need to be exterminated at high rates. They always bring up black women because they don't like to talk about the fact, they like to talk about the fact without talking about it, basically, that they basically do not like to see the black race replace themselves and also populate the country higher than other populations. So their way of keeping the numbers in check is abortion. So, yeah, continue.
America, for you to even be speaking on it, it's heartbreaking as a woman, as a black woman, to see an argument like this. Because again, my point in this video is not that whoever is pro-life or pro-choice, that's not the argument that I'm talking about. My point is that she downplayed the atrocities of slavery and the fact that they literally involved the murdering of black babies. You know, the argument that she's making, her argument is, abortions are murdering kids. That's why it's worse than slavery. Our children were literally murdered during slavery. And I'm not talking about a 2-week-old fetus.
Yeah, like I said, honestly, you're trying to say that they were murdered in slavery. Yes, that is true. Just like everybody else was murdered in slavery. But were 20 million children murdered from slavery? No. 20 million black slaves were not murdered from slavery in any regard, while 20 million unborn black children, have been murdered by abortion. So when you try and act like abortion is somehow you're gonna try and avoid it or try and act like, oh, you're downplaying it. No, it's not downplaying it. You're downplaying abortion, because abortion kills way more people than slavery ever killed. Once the black race is eradicated and there is no one that is actually black, they have officially exterminated the black race. Enslaving the black race is bad, yes, but we can always uplift and we can uprise from slavery. We cannot uprise from death. We cannot uprise from extermination. So if black people are exterminated through abortion, it is actually a way more lethal tool to remove the black race and to destroy the black race and to demolish the black race than slavery ever was. Continue.
Talking about actual 8-month babies. I'm talking about children. I'm talking about how they used to feed our children to
Unborn children are children. Like I said, you're upset at the fact that someone is pointing this out because you like abortion and you don't like admitting and you like downplaying the effects of how abortion has affected black people. Because if you were actually paying attention or if you could actually talk about it, you would see it's a number one killer of black people at this day and age. While the things you're listing are not the number one killer of black people during slavery, not even during slavery. The main way black people died during slavery was not through being killed as children. So, and then also the whole thing about feeding kids to alligators, that never actually was proven to actually be true. And it's just something some people kind of just use as a joke, basically. Continue.
Alligators. And she sat here and made this argument and basically said that our lives don't mean shit. Like, it's so interesting when y'all.
No, you're saying that your life doesn't matter. You're saying that it doesn't mean shit because you say that you support the extermination of black people in vitro at a 20 million rate. You want 20 million unborn black babies, want 20 million black babies to be killed, and you think that that's how it should be. That has obviously been half of our population. And it's only in 2 generations that we have been demolished like this. And you support every bit of it. So you are saying that black lives do not matter because the one way black people are getting killed is specifically by abortion. And you are saying that that is okay. You are saying that black people dying from that is okay and that black lives don't matter. Because you don't care about the main way that black lives are being lost. So she seems more pro-black than you will ever be, especially with the stances that you're having right now, trying to make jokes of black people and the mortality rate of black people being targeted by abortion.
Y'all say these things, and it proves that you don't view black people as human or anything.
No, you don't view black people as human because you don't view black babies as human. You don't value the fact that black babies are targeted the most out of any race of babies. You don't value your own offsprings. You don't value your own kind, your next generation. You have no value in that sense for your own, not her. She values black babies' lives. She values black lives and how they're lost by abortion, which is the number one killer of black people. So that is my thing. It's just like, you're showing that you don't care by cracking jokes and being silly like this because you know that specifically you are in the wrong for ignoring the fact that black lives matter. Of course, you don't want to act like Black Lives Matter when you support the destruction of black lives.
There's one of two options here, okay? Either you all think of slavery and you think it was just black people picking cotton all day, shucking and jiving. Oh, boss, this ain't too bad, and that's bad enough. That's bad enough, right? Or two, you know the atrocities of slavery. You know how deep it was, and you don't care. Countless black kids were killed during slavery. So if your argument is, oh, abortion is bad because it kills babies, that's why it's worse than slavery, that argument doesn't make sense because slavery, it resulted in so much murder of so many black kids. So again, it boils down to you must just not care about black lives. That's what it.
No, because slavery, there were less children dying than it. In slavery, less black children were dying than they are today. So you clearly don't value black lives because there are 20 million black children being killed by abortion. There weren't nearly as many children dying from slavery, black children dying from slavery back in the day. So you're talking about anecdotal situations. Percentage wise, obviously, it wasn't a high percentage. Reason why was not because the slave owners cared about the children. I mean, heck, half the children were their own children and they didn't give a damn about them. But the point is that they saw them as property. They did not want to kill them as quickly and as readily as some black people want to kill their own children in this day and age. It's so sad that the slave owners cared more about black children than the black women that are a part of those abortion clinics. Just being completely honest, if you're killing your kid on a 40% rate, you obviously don't value your kids. You know, somebody who sees black kids as property values that kid more than you value your own kid. That is so fucked up. People like that should never have children. Anyway, continue.
Since she brought up slavery, though, I want to bring up a book I recently read. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right now that I was not a huge fan of this book. I would not recommend that you read it. But I do want to bring up one thing that pertains to this conversation. So, the book is called The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I pronounced it Du Bois on purpose because he didn't want it to be pronounced Du Bois, okay? So, in this novel, okay, honestly, like I said, I didn't really like the novel, but I liked the premise of it. I feel like it had potential, but it just didn't go right, okay? So this novel, basically, it follows a family throughout their generations in America, right? So the book goes back and forth between the past and the present. Like in the present day, the family still lives on the plantation that they've been enslaved on generations ago. So the book goes back and forth, you know, to go back to the past and talk about what the enslaved ancestors were going through. And I'm bringing this up because there was one part where the enslaver, the white man, he was raping one of the little black girls on the plantation. And there was this discussion about how to make sure you either A, didn't get pregnant, or B, if you did get pregnant, to make sure that you got rid of that pregnancy. So they were discussing different roots and berries and herbs and teas you can make. So like if you miss your period, you can make some concoction and drink it, and hopefully that gets rid of the baby, right? So I'm thinking about that because this woman brought up abortion and brought up slavery, and she knows nothing about the complex trauma that occurred during slavery concerning abortions. Those enslaved women were being raped. They didn't want to have their enslavers' babies. And again, I want to make it clear that this video is not about, pro-life versus pro-choice, because that's going to water down exactly what I'm talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of opinions on that, and I will make videos about that, at some other time. But right now, I'm talking about how this woman has no understanding of the complex atrocities that occurred during slavery, yet
Okay, so saying that black women have been trying to kill their babies since the beginning of slavery is not actually arguing anything in favor of what? You're saying that black women have always devalued black babies or whatever? I mean, like, what are you trying to do here? You're actually vilifying black women by talking about that, in my opinion. I honestly feel like this, though. I don't think most people most black women obviously did not try to kill their kids, even in those situations. It's just some did because, some people will kill their kids in any situation. But I don't think most black women did that, because if that was really the case, and how are black Americans 75% black? It's not from, because you're saying of the rape or whatever that occurred. That's not the case, because we already know that most black Americans basically are genetically the same as if someone has a white grandparent. And most black men have a paternal line that is Eurocentric, paternal haplogroup, basically. So that's why I'm like, you're not proving anything other than, black women have devalued black babies' lives since slavery. You're putting the blame on black women. What does she, as an Asian woman, have to do with black slave women not valuing black babies' lives even during slavery? It has nothing to do with anything. You're just depicting more of a picture of, oh, so black women have basically had this vitriol towards black children for a long time period, and people of other races have tried to save black lives, black babies' lives, you know? So, yeah, I just don't really agree with that narrative, because, like, I don't think all black women are demonic like that. So, anyway, continue. As a black woman myself,
she chose to speak on slavery and say, oh, it's not as serious as whatever. How dare you? You don't know the first thing about slavery. There were generations of African American women who tried to do makeshift abortions because they didn't want to have their enslavers' babies. There were generations of African American women who were forced to have abortions of children that they did want because white lynch mobs would kill them. There were generations of African American women who lost children that they'd already had because, again, these lynch mobs, these white racists. Yet you sit here and you talk about this violation of human rights targeted towards unborn babies is the worst thing that happened in the world, as if that didn't happen during slavery too. That's the gag, though, because in her mind, slavery is just something that was like, oh, black people were made to pick cotton. That's not that bad. Oh, yeah.
to me, the way I see it is kind of weird too. So basically, you're saying that you should have been aborted, which is really weird. You do know you're the product of that. I mean, she specifically told us her genetics. So, what are you talking about? Saying that black people should be aborted because of the history of abuse or the history of poverty, the history of slavery? I mean, saying that because, oh, somebody wanted to kill their kids, that's a good thing. I never understood that. You guys always act like, oh, the mother wants to get an abortion, therefore that means that she should. Because of what? So just because somebody wants to kill someone, they should be able to kill them? That doesn't make much sense to me. It's not their body, it's not their life, and it's not their choice. Because it's not their DNA. It's simple as that. But it's more insane how black American babies are targeted in this regard, because it's like so much of the time people act like black lives matter, but they clearly don't matter to people who think that black babies being aborted was a good thing in this time period or during slavery. You obviously don't value black lives. You encourage the genocide of black lives. So,
because black people are lazy anyway, whatever, right? In her mind, that's all it is. So she made this faulty comparison, not even realizing, it's time for bed. I want to mention one last thing before I wrap this video up. I want to talk about the concept of forced breeding during transatlantic slavery. Now, let's think logically. Why would you continue to buy enslaved people when you can just force the ones that you've already purchased to breed for free? Because I don't think y'all realize how expensive enslaved people actually were. Like, my mind was blown when I looked up the prices on those slave selling records and converted them to today's money. I was like, yo, what people were selling for like the equivalent of like hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have to realize these people were very expensive. And that begins to give you some insight as to why the United States is such a huge power to this day. Where did all that wealth come from, right? But anyway, let's get back to my point about forced breeding. That was a logical step, right? Instead of spending another $200,000 on an enslaved person, you could force the two that you had already purchased to breed and have a child, and either you had another slave or you could sell that child, and suddenly you had like a never-ending money-making scheme, right? In fact, this was mentioned in the movie Mandingo. That was a really good movie. I suggest you watch it if you haven't. But in that movie, they literally used African Americans as like dog fighting, right? They would literally throw us in the ring together and be like, fight to the death. That was a means of entertainment. Again, there was a lot of sick stuff going on during slavery, right? But in this movie, the white enslaver, he was like, I need a full-blooded Mandingo, because those are the best fighters. So instead of buying a mandingo, because that would be very expensive, because even a cheap enslaved person was very expensive. Like somebody bootleg and run down was expensive. So a mandingo in his prime, strongest stuff, that would be like ridiculously out of the park, right? So this man took the enslaved mandingo man that he had and forced him to have a child with an enslaved mandingo woman. Now, unbeknownst to the man and woman that he forced to breed, they were siblings or something. Now, they didn't know this because, of course, during slavery, people were separated from their families. So I believe the Mandingo man was sold to a different plantation or something. So they did not know that they were actually brother and sister, which, that's just a whole nother sick aspect of white people. But let me go on. Let me get back to my point, though. As soon as an African American girl got her period, she was immediately bred like a cattle. And I'm talking child after child after child after child after child. You know, nowadays they say wait to have sex for 6 weeks after you have your baby, let everything close up. And then you honestly shouldn't get pregnant for like another year at least so your body can heal and everything. Do you think they was following them guidelines for those enslaved African American girls? No, of course not. As soon as you pop one baby out, you was pregnant with another one, literally, right? And of course, a lot of those poor girls and those poor women, because they bred them until they could not breed them anymore, a lot of them, they attempted to do makeshift abortions on themselves. Because who wants to go through that? It's crazy to me how...
So, to me, I just find this really weird. So you're saying the reproduction of black people is such a bad thing, but the killing of unborn black children is a good thing. Like I said, this mentality in itself is exactly, to me, in my opinion, what makes people in favor of extermination of black people. When you think negatively of black children and you do not like the reproduction of black children and you try to act like, oh, it was terrible, they reproduced or whatever. And yes, I understand you're saying forced breeding and so forth and things of that nature. To me, it's still saying that you should kill someone just because somebody reproduced in a short period of time. To me, one, considering the tribes that black Americans come from, there's a lot of high fertility rates. So reproduction can sometimes be a bit faster. That in itself, to me, doesn't mean that someone should be killing people because they just happen to have children back to back like that. That is what some people do. I mean, like in my family, for example, my mother's mother, my mother's grandparents, great grandparents, both of them, and so forth, that where it's like a consistent having children like year after year thing. That's not specifically that it's forced breeding, by the way. That's just a matter of you don't have contraception back then, and if you have very fertile women, then that's what happens. If you're genetically a part of that stock that just is very fertile, you'll have babies every year, basically. So, I mean, like, even my grandmother, I believe, was on birth control, and she still had 8 children, like, back to back every year, pretty much, besides, like, 2 of the times she miscarried, and that's why she has, like, we have, like, about, like, 9 a year, and, like, I think it's like, no, it's 23 months apart in one area, and then my mother is like 18 months apart from her other sibling because of that. So, like you saying forced breeding, one, I take that lightly. Two, like I said, with reproduction of black children, seeing it as a negative thing and acting like, oh, black women should get abortions and that's a positive thing, is the idea that you believe in extermination. You like the numbers being lower for black people because you do not like to see the reproduction of black people. You do not like the black race flourishing. And, there's a lot of black people who are like that, who hate black people and hate black children like that, But To me, it's just like, don't make it into a thing where you're trying to say she's hating black people when you are hating black people, and you, throughout this whole video, tried to minimize the extermination of black babies. Who, like I said, this is the highest level of genocide against black people, and slavery still doesn't even compare to it, because 20 million black slaves were not killed at any age due to slavery, while abortion has killed 20 million black people in less than 50 years. So, like I said, you do not value black lives. You support the genocide of black people, and you do not like the existence of black children. You do not like the existence of you don't like black women reproducing, and you can tell by the story of saying forced breeding and things of that nature. You're equating black women to animals, you're equating black children to animals. You are devaluing them, and you don't see their lives as valuable. White people had a lot of children back in the day as well, before birth control and so forth. Does anyone talk about them and their reproduction as if it's breeding? Like they're an animal just breeding? No, because you value white children. You do not value black children. And that is the internalized hate you have within yourself. And this is what causes black children to get killed on average more often than white children due to abortion. More black children are killed by abortion than white children. And white children, literally, are 60% of the population. Black children are 14%. Yet the rate of abortion for a black child is literally 40% nationally, while white children are 30%. So, yeah, that's basically all I have to say here. It's just that, I just kind of feel like, if you could understand that some people actually do value Black lives, and they actually do believe in the slogan Black Lives Matter, like this Asian woman believes in Black Lives Matter, like I believe in Black Lives Matter, and, how we do not appreciate the fact that in New York, Black babies are aborted more times than they're actually born. Because of all of that, if you were to actually understand that some people do not appreciate the extermination of black babies, whether we're black, whether we're white, whether we're Asian, we do value black lives just like we value every baby's life. It's the baby's life, the baby's choice, and the baby's right. And, no one has the right to take that from the baby, because it's their right, it's their life, and it's their body, their DNA. So that's all I'm going to say in this video. It was funny that you tried to make other people seem racist when all you did was show your own internalized self-hate and how you hate black people. I'm going to be done now. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe, comment down below, and have a great day. Bye, guys.